Welcome to ACI Learning's Leadership Series. I'm your host, Lauren Deal, and I'm so excited to have this conversation today, which is all about how to build a successful IT team. And here to help us with that today is Naomi Buckwalter, who is the Director of Product Security. Welcome, Naomi.
Lauren, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
This is going to be a really great conversation for people who are in organizations trying to enhance their leadership within their internal teams. And so I'm excited to jump right into our first conversation, which is all about just upskilling. How do we take our teams from where they are with the evolution of tech always changing on a daily basis? How do we take what they currently have and take them to the next level?
Well, I kind of want to push back on this question almost because, why is it our responsibility? If you think about it, the best team players are the ones who are encouraging themselves to grow. So, if your question is more for, is it on us to actually we have to do this for our team members, or are we picking the right team members who are already doing this on their own? What do you think?
Ooh, I love that because that's already making you have an understanding of what is your recruiting process like. What are the skills you're looking for? What are you, who are you finding before you even bring them onto your team? That's a great point. Elaborate a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. I know. That's exactly what we're trying to say is are we building our teams with the right people? I mean, if you're driving a bus and well, this is a terrible analogy, but let's continue anyway. But if you're driving a bus and you don't have the right people in the right seats, then maybe when you get to that destination, whatever you're doing there is just not going to work. So if you're got the wrong bus driver, for example, and they're taking you to the wrong place, again, a terrible analogy, but let's go with it. The idea is you want to build up the team by picking the right people with the right skills. Now you're asking Naomi, what exactly are those right skills, right? And so, Lauren, give me an example. What do you think a good IT team member would have? What kind of skill would they have?
Well, I think even if it's not even like the hard tech skills, it's the soft skills of communication and wanting to be a team player. But then from the tech side, what do you think is valuable?
Well, I want to focus on the soft skills because those aren't soft skills that are hard. Those are actually the hardest skills possible. If you think about it, you've got all the executive function skills, time management, stress management, the ability to initiate tasks, to sustain attention. All these things are very important for basically anyone working in a corporate environment. Yes. And then put on top of that, the difficulty of learning something like a technology, a new tech, a new way of doing something. What's interesting to me in my experience is the hardest things are those soft skills, the executive function skills, the ability to communicate and learn and persevere and stuff like that. It's the stuff that you can learn from a book that's almost the easiest thing ever. And especially if you're putting these team members up for success, if you've got the processes in place and you're very encouraging, you're giving them room to grow, to fail, and to learn, then those people will shine because you've gotten the right people on the seats in the bus. Terrible analogy, but let's go with it. Then you've got these people who are desperately trying their best to grow in their own way. And they're just the kind of the best team members that you'll ever work with. And so hopefully the listeners here have experienced some of that, or they themselves are those people. But I would say in general, the hardest skills are those soft ones. It's really, really hard to learn.
All right, well, let's start there and say that soft skills are something that we should be looking for in potentially the interview or even before that. What would you say to someone who is recruiting for their tech team? What are the key elements that you would look for beyond just the soft skills? Who do you want on
Beyond the
your
soft
bus?
skills. Do I want my bus? Terrible analogy, but let's go with it. The idea, well, okay, so one of my favorite questions in cybersecurity, you kind of have to ask the purpose of cybersecurity. So if you're in tech and you're in cyber, you really have to understand the purpose of it, why it exists, what's part of how does it fit in the organization? And depending on the maturity of the person, they can answer one of two ways. They can say, hey, security is there to stop the business from doing anything bad, to protect the business, to secure all the assets and to make sure no one gets hacking, whatever, all the hacking. And then, so that to me is a more immature answer. The more mature answer, and this is what I look for, is, hey, security is there to guide the business, to help the business manage risk, to get the business where they want to go, but then do it in a safe way and the securest way possible. And yes, you're going to have to sometimes say no, but in most cases, you're going to say, instead of no, let's tell you how to do something. And those are the more mature answers. So I look for those answers because I know these people have had the understanding of why something exists, like the why. It's so important. And if you as a hiring manager consider this, you don't want to ask somebody what they know. You really want to ask them how or why they know this thing. Like, why is it this way? Get them to think critically about something. And it doesn't even matter what question you're asking. If you're asking something like, what port is SSH on? Everyone knows the answer is 22 because you can just Google that, right? You can memorize that 5 seconds before the interview starts. That's a terrible question. You don't want to ask those kind of questions. What you want to ask is like, why do we use like asymmetric encryption? Like, what is that for? What is that? What is those like general usages of it? It's like, why would we use it in this specific case? Ask those deep critical thinking questions so that you can help guide them to see what their thought process is.
I
And
love
that
that.
to me are one of the best interview questions.
Well, I love that because you're getting into their mindset. You're trying to understand how they would approach something. And like you said, you don't want something that's just recall because, like you said, anyone can find that answer and it's not authentic. It's not something that they generated, it's something that they are just memorizing. But I like the idea of buy-in and what is their why. So scenario-based questions, I feel like, are the best way to get to understand how someone's mind works in a security situation. So if we're bringing into someone into the interview and we're trying to understand their why, how would you dig into that?
How would I dig into that? It's really on almost a conversation when you're having an interview. You want to start getting them to explain to you why, like how they think about things and why certain things are a certain way. And then you ask questions based off of that. I think once I heard someone say the best kind of questions get to 7 levels of why. Maybe it was like Simon Sinek or something, but you want to like start with a why and then just keep asking, well, okay, why is that? Like be the annoying 2-year-old toddler that is like, why? But like seriously, in all honesty, it's okay to ask these things because you're getting to the root of what this person might be thinking, where they might have that judgment, right? Like where is that actually coming from? Where is that experience coming from? Have they lived through something that helped teach them this way? Did they fail in a certain way to help them have this information that says like, okay, this is the right way of doing it versus this is the wrong way of doing it? Like you're taking this information through a conversation, and it should always be that back and forth conversation, not just answer this like a test. That's not gonna get you that right person. You want to have that conversation, that flow, the ability to pull that out that information kind of like a teacher would.
Yes. And I also loved what you said about just the back and forth conversation, which makes me wonder, do you assume that the people who are coming to the interview have all the skills needed for a certain role? Or do you assume that if they have a really good background and a lot of inquisitive thoughts and a really good why, that you can train them to get to where you want them to be? What's your stance?
Okay, so what's interesting is not a lot of managers are going to be good at this. Like I've had managers too. But interestingly, sometimes that's okay. For the organization, it really just depends. Like if your organization needs a body to be a cog in the wheel, then you hire the cog in the wheel because that's what you need. But say you're on a high performing team and you want to lead the high performing teams, then you're going to look for somebody with that emotional intelligence, the ability to persevere, like all these things that we talk about in terms of soft skills and executive functioning, and like all these things that are important to helping grow not just the thing that you're trying to make on your team, but like how can you affect at a positive way the broader organization? So I forget what your question is, Lauren, but I kind of like the idea is just you want to be asking these questions in a way to help see the larger picture, the bigger, like the person themselves, not just their nuggets of thought and the experience that they might have, but like what really drives them, what's interesting about them, what helps them grow, what makes them a human, what would help them, what would help your team the most because you're understanding who that person is. And I think that's kind of like the best way of doing it. And again, not every single manager is going to be great at this. Sometimes you just need to hire the cog in the wheel. And there will be times where it's okay to just hire that cog in the wheel. But maybe there's a better way. Like maybe you can hire someone because they're just an awesome human and that they can learn and they can grow. And that's good. You want to take that. That's good talent.
And I like that you mentioned the teacher mindset. Uh, obviously someone could fit as a puzzle piece in our big scheme of puzzle. If you zoom out as a good manager and you can see where they can fit long term, maybe they don't fit perfectly right now, but you can shape them and mold them into what you want them to be. But from a teacher mindset, having that understanding that this person brings so much more value to the overall team than maybe what they initially bring to the table, and seeing their growth mindset of what they can become because maybe they're innovative and they show interest. What kind of pilot programs or what kind of programs do you feel that an organization should offer in order to get someone from point A to potentially point Z?
Oh, that would be great. Well, you mentioned growth mindset, which is, I think, a term that Carol Dweck, like a really important innovator in the psychology space of just growth and psychology. Yeah, I love that. So I don't know about pilot programs because I think any good organization is going to want to grow their talent and their resources. But again, it really comes down to the intrinsic values of that person themselves. So if you're hiring the right people, they're going to do this with or without you. Like they're going to grow themselves because that's what they want. And when you find that person, you're going to know. You're going to know because you have that historical evidence from them. You can see like, hey, tell me a time where you actually learned something difficult. I hired somebody and she learned 3 different languages. One to be a nanny for a German couple with a child from Germany, right? Like, and another time because she wanted to sing opera. These are the things that are like so interesting to me. It's like you learned 3 languages, that's amazing. And to me, that's just historical data. You're using historical data like any good technologist would because you're making decisions based off of data and not just your emotions.
That's true. They're both valuable, having both pieces together, but with a balance. And I'm thinking about all of the changes that are going on in the tech space now. I mean, every day we wake up and something new is happening, especially with AI on the scene. From a security standpoint, if you are the leader of an organization, how do you take your current workforce and move them with a growth mindset from what we knew yesterday to what we need to know today?
Wait, sorry. Repeat that.
That's okay. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Yeah, just repeat that. Yeah.
With all of the tech that's happening, going on every day, when we wake up, yesterday's news is now old because today something different has changed. In a security space, as the manager of an organization, how do you take your current team and keep them moving forward with training, or how do you just prepare them for the new needs?
Yeah. Okay. So this requires a lot of conversations with your team. So if you're having those weekly one-on-ones and they're checking in with you, honestly, you want to start getting this ahead of time. So if you know that somebody is interested in like data analytics or maybe cloud or something that is a fairly mature space, there's lots of cloud things, there's a lot of data analytics things. Your company isn't going to be the first one to jump into a brand new thing. Hopefully, maybe they do, and that's okay. Like AI, oh, we're going to jump into that thing. Hopefully they don't do this. But if your company is already planning, hey, in a few years, we're going to have enough data to do data science and data lakes and all these fun things, right? You'd be like, okay, like this is good. So you as a leader is going to remember this. And by the time you have the conversations with your one-on-ones, with your direct reports, then you're going to be like, hey, you know what? Our company might be looking into a data lake in the next 6 months. Would you have any interest, direct report, in researching everything there is about data lakes, right? And then so the person might be like, data lakes, yeah, no. Or they can be like, actually, yeah, I've already read about data analytics and data science and the transformative, whatever the marketing term is now, for all the data things, and just be like, yeah, it'd be really interesting. We could use it this way in our company. Why don't we aggregate this data and spice it up with more data? And now we can do other things. Like they will have already thought about this because they have that growth mindset, and they will come to you and be like, yeah, actually, I did think about that. Yeah, I absolutely want to do the research for the data lake. I want to see what kind of different lakes that we can bring in, what cloud providers that would be the best fit for us, what kind of data ingress that we can use, like what kind of things that we could use to, all the different tools that we could use to like parse the data. Like they'll get really excited about it because they are that type of person.
That's great. Getting people excited and buy-in.
Yeah, getting them buy-in because they're already excited about that. But you as a leader already know and have prepared them because you're hopefully having those conversations with the broader organization of like, hey, what are our business priorities? What are our business needs? Because in the future, we're going to have, again, to the data lake thing, we're going to have more customers. We're going to want to pull in more analytics. We're going to want to help them with these data analytics some way, right? And so you understand your customers, you understand your business, and then that way you bring it back to your team and you say like, hey, you know what, it'd be great if we had a solution for this in about 6 months. Why don't you start doing some research now? And that person's going to be like all over it, because they're going to be like, that's going to help the business, it's going to help me grow something, a new skill, I get to play around with some new tools, blah blah blah. Like it hits on so many different levels. They're going to love it.
Well, I think as a manager, you just hit the nail on the head is great communication with your team, understanding what their why is, what gets them excited, what lights them up, what makes them want to move the needle of success for the whole company forward because they are electrically charged by this. And from a security standpoint, when there's new security risks every day, getting people excited on your team, how do you motivate your team to push the needle forward for your organization specifically?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Again, hopefully I've hired the right people on my team who already have this intrinsically, and they know that they want to learn something and grow. And I almost don't have to do anything because that's just their personality. But I have had people where it's been like pulling teeth to get them to learn something new. And I will tell you, I struggle with those too. But with the good comes the bad. And sometimes I have little tricks. It'd be like, well, conversations again. What are you interested in? What do you like to do? And then trying to marry that up with something that the organization needs. Be like, oh, that's cool. You like AI technology? You're playing around. Like, what are you doing in your spare time? AI stuff? That's kind of cool. Like, what if we could use this one tool that I heard of? And why don't we see if that would fit for a project that we're trying to use, right? Why don't you talk to an engineer? Like, they're also doing something here internally using that tool. Why don't we help them with that? Especially with cybersecurity, we're always trying to be a service for the business, trying to help the engineers find secure ways of building things. And so having those conversations, building those relationships is only going to help our broader organization. And that's what we want, especially in cybersecurity. So building relationships, getting interest in new tools. I think even when it's pulling teeth, when getting somebody to be like, oh, I don't feel like learning anything, I'm totally burnt out or whatever, be like, let's take it slow. Is there anything that does interest you? Is there? And then maybe trying to find something that to help the company at the same time.
That
It
is
takes a little bit of
a really beautiful way to bring someone who maybe has lost their passion back into the passion space again. You sound like a fantastic manager. I would love to work with you.
Well, I've had my ups and downs, and I've had struggles just like any other manager. But I think that's good because otherwise I would never grow. Right? You can't ever start becoming a great manager in the first place. There have been failures, but there have been successes too, and that's all part of the journey. And it's really, I think, part of that whole growth mindset that you mentioned earlier before. Like if I had failed, if I had been like, oh, I had to fire this guy, and just because it wasn't working out, if I hadn't learned from that, I would say that was a failure. But because I learned from it, now I can say it wasn't a failure. I've actually grown from that. And I think every good manager is able to say that too.
And I like that you say communication, mentorship, and training within the organization is something that, as good leaders, we should be looking for. Any advice to someone who's watching this and is trying to build a team and maybe just needs a couple nuggets of more wisdom? What would you say to them?
All right. So, kind of like my first tip is see potential in everyone. Literally look at them with open eyes and an open heart and just feel like, what kind of good things are about you? Don't have that preconceived notion of like, I've been your manager for 5 years and there's absolutely nothing that I can get from you anymore. Like, you are just a cog in the wheel. But what if you step back and say, wait a second, this is a fully grown human adult and they have human needs and they have human wants and human desires and all the beautiful human things that come with being a human. Take a look at that and just be like, who are you as a human? Because you're more than just a worker. You're more than just a cog in the wheel. You are a special human person with all the things that come with it. And so once you see the potential in others, beautiful things happen, Lauren. Like literally beautiful things happen. And you could do this to anyone. It's not just your teammates. It's literally anyone that you meet, like in the supermarket, standing in line, the person behind the deli counter. Like you can learn something from literally anybody if you open up your mind to it. And then you start seeing things in different patterns. And then you're just like, oh, so you're this kind of person. I've seen this success in another person. What if I could do this thing? And then you become kind of like the person behind the scenes moving the pieces around to get people to be successful. Because I think ultimately you want your team to be successful. I actually, no, that's not true. I have met managers who like actively sabotage their teams, but hopefully if you're listening to this, like you're one of the people who actually care, right? Like I'm spending time to listen to Naomi and her crazy talk, and just listening to this, I'm spending 20 minutes of my time listening to this. Maybe that's a good thing because you are willing to grow yourself. You're willing to grow your team. You're willing to put in that effort. And because of this, I realize the people listening to this, you are going to be able to pull out and see the potential in humans and potential in your teammates and be like, yes, teammate, you are awesome. Like, even though I've been your manager for 5 years and you haven't done anything special lately, like what maybe we can get you to do something cool. Like, what if we could? Like, what if you are awesome and I've just been wasting your potential, right? Like, see the potential in others. I think that's the magic of it.
Ooh, all right, mic drop. That was fantastic. Pulling back the onion, really getting to know your people. And like you said, if their passion has been a little dormant lately, how can we reignite that fire and really make our team cohesively work together in a more beautiful way? Naomi, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We're so happy to have you here for our leadership series. And this episode all about how to build a successful tech team. Any final words before we let you go?
Well, I mean, Lauren, you said it all. It's really just, seeing the potential in others. But I do want to add one more point. If you want to change others, it's almost impossible. The only thing you could do is change yourself. So look for the potential in others, see if you can change yourself and the way you approach things. It's a mindset thing. You can do anything.
There you heard it here, folks. Thank you so much, Naomi, for bringing us a growth mindset in this episode. And if you want to follow Naomi, make sure you check her out on LinkedIn and catch up with her and get some more leadership tips. Thank you so much, Naomi.